Your mind never stops talking. Right now, even as you read this, there's a voice running in the background. Sometimes it whispers doubts about your abilities. Sometimes it replays conversations from years ago. Sometimes it creates entire scenarios of failure that haven't even happened yet. This internal narrator shapes how you see yourself, how you interpret the world, and whether you can focus on what actually matters. Most people spend their entire lives listening to this voice without questioning it, assuming every thought that appears must be important, must be true, must be dealt with immediately. But what if I told you that the majority of your thoughts are nothing more than mental recycling, old patterns playing on repeat, and that your inability to focus has less to do with discipline and more to do with not understanding how your mind actually works? Today we're going to explore something that could change everything. Not vague advice about positive thinking, but practical understanding of how toxic thoughts form, why they stick, and most importantly, how to erase them so you can finally reclaim the mental clarity you've been searching for. Your brain produces somewhere between 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts per day. That's an overwhelming number, and here's what makes it more complicated. Your mind doesn't distinguish between useful thoughts and destructive ones. It simply generates them based on patterns, memories, fears, and habits you've built over years. Neuroscientist Joe Dispenza explains that when you've thought something so many times, your body begins to memorize the emotion attached to it. You wake up and immediately start thinking about your problems. Each problem is connected to specific memories, and each memory carries an emotion. Before you even get out of bed, you're already living in the past, feeling emotions from yesterday, last week, or even years ago. This creates what he calls a state of being rooted entirely in what already happened. And if your thoughts are stuck in the past, your future becomes nothing more than a repetition of it. You're not creating anything new because your mind is too busy replaying the old. What makes toxic thoughts so powerful is not their truth, but their repetition. Your brain is designed to recognize patterns and create shortcuts. When you think the same negative thought repeatedly, your brain builds a neural pathway for it, like carving a groove into stone. The more you think it, the deeper the groove becomes, until eventually that thought appears automatically without any conscious effort. You don't decide to feel inadequate when you see someone else succeed. You don't choose to replay embarrassing moments from the past. These thoughts arrive uninvited because they've been practiced so thoroughly that they've become your mind's default setting. And once a thought becomes automatic, it starts to feel like truth, like a fundamental part of who you are, even when it's nothing more than a mental habit that's been running unchecked for too long. If you are new to this channel, please subscribe to this channel. This helps to spread the knowledge to others. Most people make a critical mistake when dealing with toxic thoughts. They try to fight them. They argue with them. They attempt to convince themselves that the negative voice is wrong. But this approach actually strengthens the thought rather than weakening it. Every time you engage with a toxic thought, every time you give it your attention and energy by trying to disprove it, you're feeding it. You're telling your brain that this thought is important enough to warrant a response. Epictetus, the ancient Stoic philosopher, understood this centuries ago. He taught that people are not disturbed by things themselves, but by the views they take of them. The thought itself has no power. Only your reaction to it does. When a toxic thought appears, the worst thing you can do is wrestle with it. The best thing you can do is observe it without attachment. Acknowledge its presence without giving it authority, and then gently redirect your attention elsewhere. This isn't suppression or denial. It's simply refusing to participate in a conversation that serves no purpose. The mind loves stories. It's constantly creating narratives to explain why things happen, why you feel certain ways, why life is the way it is. And often, these stories are built on incomplete information, assumptions, and emotional reactions rather than facts. You interpret someone's silence as rejection. You turn one mistake into evidence that you're incompetent. You take a setback and transform it into proof that you'll never succeed. These aren't truths. They're interpretations, stories your mind constructed to make sense of ambiguous situations. Psychologist Carl Jung recognized that much of human suffering comes from confusing these mental stories with reality. He believed that knowing yourself, truly understanding the difference between what actually happened and what your mind says it means, is the beginning of wisdom. When you start questioning the stories you tell yourself, when you separate events from interpretations, toxic thoughts begin to lose their grip. You realize that the voice in your head isn't narrating objective reality. It's offering one possible interpretation, usually colored by fear, past experiences, and protective instincts that are trying to keep you safe, but often keep you stuck instead. Toxic thoughts rarely appear in isolation. They cluster together, forming what psychologists call rumination loops. You start with one negative thought, which triggers a related memory, which brings up an associated feeling, which reminds you of another failure, and before you know it, you're deep in a mental spiral that feels impossible to escape. This happens because your brain is associative. Thoughts, memories, and emotions are all linked together in networks. Activate one node in the network, and the entire chain lights up. The key to breaking these loops isn't to address every thought individually. That would take forever and exhaust you completely. The key is to interrupt the pattern early, the moment you notice the first toxic thought appearing. You do this not by pushing it away, but by consciously shifting your attention to something concrete and present: your breath, the physical sensations in your body, an object in front of you, anything that anchors you back to the current moment, rather than letting you drift into the abstract world of worry and regret, where toxic thoughts thrive. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote extensively about the power of perception. He understood that you have control over your mind, not over external events, and that recognizing this distinction is where your strength lives. The world will always present challenges, disappointments, and uncertainties. Other people will always act in ways you don't understand or agree with. Circumstances will shift beyond your control. But none of these external realities have the power to create toxic thoughts in your mind. Only your interpretation of them does. When you fully grasp this, when you internalize that your thoughts are not forced upon you by the world, but generated by how you choose to perceive the world, everything changes. You stop being a victim of your circumstances and become the architect of your internal experience. This doesn't mean pretending everything is fine when it's not. It means recognizing that you can experience difficulty without letting that difficulty define your mental state. You can face problems without becoming consumed by problem-focused thinking. One of the most overlooked aspects of mental clarity is the role of your body. Your thoughts don't exist in isolation from your physical state. When you're exhausted, hungry, or physically tense, your mind becomes more susceptible to negative thinking patterns. Your brain is an organ that requires energy, nutrients, and rest to function properly. When those needs aren't met, it defaults to threat detection mode, scanning for problems and dangers even when none exist. This is why toxic thoughts often feel worse late at night or when you're running on empty. Your depleted physical state is creating the conditions for mental distortion. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, recognized that we often suffer more in imagination than in reality. But imagination becomes particularly wild when the body is under strain. Simple physical interventions, a short walk, deep breathing, stretching, drinking water, can shift your mental state more effectively than hours of trying to think your way out of negativity. Movement interrupts rumination. It brings you back into your body and out of the abstract mental loops that toxic thoughts create. Another secret to erasing toxic thoughts is understanding the difference between observation and identification. Most people don't just experience thoughts, they become them. When anxiety appears, they say, "I am anxious," rather than, "I notice anxiety present in me." When self-doubt arises, they say, "I am not good enough," rather than, "A thought suggesting inadequacy has appeared." This might seem like a subtle linguistic difference, but it's actually profound. When you identify with your thoughts, you give them the power to define you. When you observe them, you create space between who you are and what you're thinking. You're not the weather passing through the sky. You're the sky itself, vast and unchanging, capable of holding storms without being damaged by them. This perspective, central to both Stoic philosophy and modern mindfulness practices, allows you to experience difficult thoughts without being controlled by them. You can acknowledge their presence while refusing to let them dictate your actions or determine your worth. Focus, real, sustained focus, becomes nearly impossible when your mind is cluttered with unresolved mental noise. You sit down to work, and within minutes you're distracted, not necessarily by external interruptions, but by internal ones. Worries about the future, regrets about the past, comparisons to others, self-criticism about not being further along. All of these thoughts compete for the same mental resources you need for concentration. Your brain has limited attentional capacity. When a significant portion of that capacity is devoted to managing toxic thoughts, there's little left over for the task in front of you. This is why some of the most intelligent people struggle with focus. It's not a lack of capability, it's an overload of mental interference. The solution isn't to try harder to concentrate, it's to clear the interference first. You don't need more discipline, you need less mental clutter. And mental clutter decreases, not through force, but through awareness, through learning to recognize toxic thoughts as they arise and choosing not to follow them down familiar destructive paths. Letting go is one of the most misunderstood concepts in mental wellness. People think letting go means forgetting, or pretending something didn't hurt, or forcing yourself to feel okay about something that wasn't okay. But letting go is none of those things. Letting go is simply the decision to stop carrying something that no longer serves you. It's recognizing that holding on to resentment, replaying past hurts, or obsessing over what cannot be changed is only punishing you, not anyone else. The person who wronged you isn't suffering because you keep thinking about it. The opportunity you missed isn't coming back because you keep regretting it. The only person still living in that pain is you. And you're choosing, whether consciously or not, to keep it alive through repetition. Letting go doesn't require that you approve of what happened. It only requires that you stop giving it permission to occupy your present moment. This is perhaps the most liberating realization you can have. You are not obligated to carry every hurt, every failure, every disappointment forever. You can acknowledge that something was difficult, learn what you need to learn from it, and then release it so it no longer drains your energy. There's a powerful connection between the stories you tell yourself and the emotions you experience. When you repeatedly tell yourself that you're not smart enough, your body responds with feelings of inadequacy. When you constantly remind yourself of past failures, your nervous system recreates the stress and shame from those moments. Your body doesn't distinguish between an event happening now and a memory you're vividly reliving. It responds to both with the same emotional and physiological reactions. This means that every time you rehearse a toxic thought, you're not just thinking about something negative, you're actually recreating the negative experience in your body. You're training your nervous system to associate certain situations with stress, fear, or shame. Over time, these associations become so strong that the mere hint of a similar situation triggers the full emotional response, even when there's no real threat present. Breaking this cycle requires more than just positive thinking. It requires actively choosing different mental rehearsals, imagining yourself responding with calm instead of panic, with confidence instead of doubt, with curiosity instead of judgment. Silence frightens many people, because in silence, without distraction, the toxic thoughts seem louder. You pick up your phone, turn on the television, or fill every quiet moment with noise because sitting with your own mind feels unbearable. But this avoidance only strengthens the thoughts. They grow in the darkness of your avoidance, becoming more powerful precisely because you refuse to face them. The practice of intentional stillness, whether through meditation, quiet reflection, or simply sitting without distraction for a few minutes each day, is not about achieving some mystical state of perfect peace. It's about building your capacity to be present with whatever arises in your mind, without immediately reacting, fixing, or fleeing. When you can sit with a difficult thought and simply observe it without judgment, without trying to make it go away, something remarkable happens. The thought loses its urgency. It becomes just another mental event passing through, no more significant than a cloud drifting across the sky. This doesn't happen immediately. Your mind will resist. It will create more thoughts, louder thoughts, trying to pull you back into familiar patterns. But with patient, consistent practice, stillness becomes less threatening and more revealing. You start to see your thoughts for what they are, temporary mental events rather than permanent truths. The relationship between attention and energy is crucial to understand. Whatever you give your attention to, you give your energy to. When you spend hours each day focused on what's wrong, what's missing, what's frightening, or what's unfair, you're directing the majority of your life force toward negativity. Not because you want to be negative, but because you've developed a habit of scanning for problems. Your brain is simply doing what it's been trained to do, looking for threats, weaknesses, and dangers. This served our ancestors well when survival depended on spotting predators and avoiding poisonous plants. But in the modern world, where most threats are psychological rather than physical, this constant scanning creates a mental environment dominated by stress and dissatisfaction. The good news is that attention is trainable. Just as you can train your body to become stronger through exercise, you can train your attention to focus on what nourishes rather than what depletes. This doesn't mean ignoring real problems. It means not manufacturing problems through catastrophic thinking. It means addressing what needs addressing and releasing what doesn't. It means consciously choosing to notice what's working alongside what isn't, what's possible alongside what's difficult, what's growing alongside what's struggling. Psychologist Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps, discovered something profound about human resilience. He observed that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our power to choose our response. This space, this gap between what happens to you and how you react to it, is where freedom lives. Toxic thoughts collapse this space. They make stimulus and response feel instantaneous and inevitable. Something happens, you immediately feel terrible, and it seems like there's no choice in the matter. But there's always a space, however brief. And with practice, you can learn to inhabit that space, to pause before reacting, to observe before responding, to choose your next thought rather than being swept along by automatic patterns. This is not easy. Your nervous system is wired for speed, for immediate reaction when threatened. But not every uncomfortable moment is a genuine threat. Most of the time, the discomfort you feel is just discomfort, temporary and manageable, not the emergency your mind makes it out to be. Learning to recognize the difference, to pause and assess rather than immediately react, is one of the most valuable skills you can develop. There's a common misconception that erasing toxic thoughts means never experiencing negativity again, that mental clarity equals constant happiness. This is not only unrealistic but also unhelpful. Negative emotions serve a purpose. Fear alerts you to danger. Sadness signals loss. Anger indicates boundary violations. These emotions aren't problems to be eliminated. They're information to be understood. The issue isn't having negative thoughts or difficult emotions. The issue is when these thoughts and emotions become chronic patterns that run independent of actual circumstances. When you feel anxious even in safe situations. When you feel inadequate even after success. When you feel threatened even when no real danger exists. This is when thoughts have become toxic, when they're no longer serving their informational purpose, but instead creating suffering that has no connection to present reality. Erasing toxic thoughts doesn't mean becoming emotionless or perpetually positive. It means developing the wisdom to recognize when a thought is offering useful information versus when it's simply recycling old fear. It means responding to genuine concerns while releasing imaginary catastrophes. It means honoring your emotions without being enslaved by them. The practice of erasing toxic thoughts and maintaining focus isn't something you perfect once and then you're done. It's a daily practice, a skill you develop gradually through consistent effort. Some days will be easier than others. Some moments you'll catch yourself early and redirect smoothly. Other times you'll realize hours later that you've been lost in negative thinking. Neither outcome defines your progress. What matters is that you keep returning to awareness, keep choosing observation over identification, keep redirecting attention from what drains you to what sustains you. Over time, these small choices accumulate. The neural pathways for toxic thoughts begin to weaken from lack of use. New pathways for clarity, presence, and constructive thinking grow stronger. Your default mental state gradually shifts from anxious and scattered to calm and focused. Not because you've eliminated all difficulty from your life, but because you've changed your relationship to your own mind. You've stopped believing every story it tells. You've stopped following every fear it presents. You've learned to be the observer of your thoughts rather than their prisoner. And in that shift, you found a freedom that no external circumstance can take away. Your thoughts are not your master. They're tools, sometimes useful, sometimes not. You don't have to believe everything you think. You don't have to follow every mental pathway your brain suggests. You have the power to observe, to question, to redirect, and to choose where you place your attention. This power has always been yours. The only thing standing between you and mental freedom is the belief that your thoughts control you, rather than the other way around. Once you see through that illusion, once you recognize that you are not the voice in your head, but the awareness behind it, everything becomes possible. Clarity replaces confusion. Focus replaces distraction. Peace replaces internal warfare. Not perfectly, not permanently, but often enough that your life begins to change in ways that matter. You move through your days with less resistance, less internal conflict, less exhaustion from fighting battles that only exist in your mind. And in that newfound space, in that mental quiet you've created through patient practice, you finally have room to build the life you actually want, rather than the one your toxic thoughts convinced you was all you deserved. If you enjoyed the video, please like it and share your thoughts in the comment. If you are new to this channel, please subscribe.